Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, I want to lead the show with a conversation with somebody who is very familiar with Nigeria's security architecture, who has spoken very widely and extensively on those issues. He's also actually the special advisor to the president of the Christian Association of Nigeria, and is the director of peace and security for the 6th region of the African Union, talking about the diaspora. I'd like to welcome for the first time to Inside Sources, all the way from Washington, D.C., Reverend Laddie Thompson. Reverend, welcome to Inside Sources.
The pleasure is mine, sir.
All right. So, since this is your first time on the show, I'd like to ask you, if you look at where the country, Nigeria, is today, what kind of future do you think is ahead of us?
That's a very pregnant question, I must say. And I don't think there's any need for us to reinvent the wheel. Let me go back to something that Obafemi Awolowo said on the 16th of July in 1952. He said, "It is our duty to aim at the erection of a new edifice, much nobler in conception, more artistic in design, and more imposing in structure and extent than any that we have hitherto been erected or contemplated." He also said something in 1958, later on. He said, "The welfare and happiness of the people of Nigeria are indivisible. So are their misfortunes." So there are two things Awolowo prescribed then that he said we needed to do immediately. That was in 1958. First, he cautioned that we needed to arrest the process of Nigeria's disintegration and reunite the country. Secondly, he said we must put an end to the prevailing internecine hostilities and reorganize our affairs in such a manner as to prevent a recrudescence, that's continual cycle of these hostilities. And if we take a cue from that, I will say that this is Nigeria's best moment, as it were, despite all the pain, despite the sorrows, the blood, the weaponization of poverty, all the things that we have been through. I want to say to us that I think we need to see the silver lining in this particular dark cloud. I believe that Nigeria is being prepared for a glorious future. So the pain that we're going through right now must be used to serve us right, for the right purpose. The pain that we are going through has been a lot, but we need to realize that everything in life has a purpose. And even in this pain, there is a purpose in this pain. And if we use the experience properly, that's beneath all the bloodshed, all the, economic poverty and all this and all that. What is going on is this, is that the clear message that Nigerians must understand is that we cannot continue to live in the prison of the past. And what this pain is doing to us is that it's helping us to produce a new national mindset, a mind shift. So what we're looking at is a maturation of the Nigerian spirit. Don't forget that the Nigerian spirit is a very, very forward-looking, resilient, innovative, creative, and a very excellent spirit. If you look at life, the history of Nigeria, and I'm talking from the perspective of the citizens right now.
Yeah, and that's the point that I wanted to interject respectfully, Reverend, that, we have not been able at the level of a collective, with the kind of resources that are also attendant, to that, personal character of the Nigerian, through our leadership and government, to make any, the kind of headway. There are those who argue, Reverend, that Nigeria ought to be operating at the levels of, if not at the level of the Americas of this world, at the levels of India and China. As you know very well, in 1960, Nigeria was even projected to go, faster and ahead of China. That was the prognosis in 1960. So I want to ask you, in your own view, what are the dominant obstacles that have come in the way of a people that are clearly, brilliant and talented, not to be able to form a government and a country that is that gives hope, not only to the black people, but a beacon of leadership in the world, as we ought to be?
Well, what I like to do is that I like to step back a bit and take an overview of the country. We need to realize that something is going on. There's a dynamic going on right now. There's a rubbing going on, and there's a change of mindset. You see, up until now, right from when we, from independence until this present moment, Nigeria has been through a whole lot of challenges. And what we're doing now is that we need to realize that we are dealing with what we call a deterministic chaos construct. Designed at inception not to function as a forward-looking country, as Awolowo mentioned. It was designed to keep failing without falling. Actually, Nigeria is a case study in chaotic complexity, not because of the size and diversity, but because we were impregnated, our foundation was tampered with. We had liberating fathers, but they were never allowed to become foundation fathers. We don't have any founding fathers till now. So what we have is a multi-layered ecosystem of patronage, ethnicity, religion, raw power, a mix of weaponized poverty, low value to human worth, and at least 5 existential threats. But the good news is this. If you look at the composition of Nigeria, 65, 66 and above, we form less than 3% of the country. 70% of the country, they are under 35 years of age. So what I'm saying now is that we may think this is difficult, but through all this pain, there's a mind shift going on that will soon congeal into definite actions. And you're going to find out that all we need to do is to shift away from analog thinking. If we move away from analog thinking to the tracks of digital thought, you will find out immediately that Nigeria, let me say this to you, I don't believe that we should be comparing Nigeria with the likes of India and some of those countries that you have mentioned. I think the people we should be comparing us with is that actually if Nigeria gets it right, we should be at the forefront of civilization. First of all, we need to be the foremost nation of Africa. Secondly, we need to be an improvement on the American 250-year democracy. We have everything it takes, especially if we can responsibly monitor, ideate, and assist the younger generations. What's that objective? Okay.
All right. I mean, excellent point, and I like the, the brilliance of your analysis very, very much. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about security. Now, we all know what the country has been going through. But lately there seems to be, in my view, or seems, I wanted to hear your view, have we gotten a turning point in this fight against insecurity? Recently we have, for the first time, a rescue, of people that were kidnapped by kidnappers and terrorists in this country. I don't remember the last time we had a rescue. I can't even recall. It's always been ransomed, paying bandits and terrorists and, all kinds of very shameful deals. But now we got, a rescue. How do you describe that? What happened in your state? Is it, does it give you hope? Certainly it gives relief, but what's your take, Reverend?
Well, like I said, from my own perspective, one of the first things I do when I'm looking at a situation is that I like us to remember that when we mathematize inquiry, the mathematization exercise helps us to reach accurate conclusions that we can go to sleep on. Not only that, there are things that may be missing to the naked eye, patterns that the eye may not see. But when you mathematize, you have the ability to concatenate, join the dots, and you are able to also draw conclusions from there. What is happening right now reminds me of, I haven't had much time to watch a football World Cup, but I tend to be cautious, and I'll tell you why. I can't remember which African team I was opportune to watch that match on TV. And I think there were 2 goals ahead until 20 minutes or something to the end of the match.
I think that was Egypt. You're talking about Egypt and Argentina.
Yes. All of a sudden, the script was flipped, and Argentina was able to put in 3 goals, win the match. Now, what I'm saying is that maturity doesn't allow us to rejoice when there is a one-off spike, as it were. What we want to do is let's look at the overview of security in the country. First of all, the primary responsibility of a government is the protection of lives and property. And what happens is that a government immediately forfeits the moral mandate to lead when they cannot guarantee internal safety and basic civic protections. Now, if we look at that responsibly, taking to stock the, American-style, quote, democracy that we are practicing, and we look at the entire country as a whole, not just the one-off spike in the Southwest, which we'll come to, we can granulate that later. The question you need to ask yourself is that, looking at the policies of governance, looking at the way the government has been handling the war against terrorism, can we really say that you and I can trust the future of our children concerning the whole war, that this nation will win the war? Nigeria is bleeding from every orifice. From when I started tracking the terror hydra in the early 2000s, 1999, 2000, I watched it expand from trickles of blood into this torrent of crimson. And my challenge is that I've always said something. There's nothing new about this war. It is globally documented as the global resurgence of extremist religious violence. There's nothing new about it. 20 years ago, I began to follow it. I was in the field, and I watched with horror because I kept saying that you cannot make a prescription for a sickness if you have not diagnosed it accurately. And my challenge is that till today, the architectural security of Nigeria as a whole is still not capable of handling the threat in a convincing manner. These are no longer the days of Clausewitz's Trinity of War. And let me say this quickly. The Nigerian architectural security has been violating a foundational principle in modern counter-insurgency doctrine. And what is that? It says that an imprecisely defined enemy produces diffuse efforts. It erodes morale. It compromises intelligence gathering. And there will be a lot of preventable casualties. In a nutshell, Nigeria cannot decisively defeat an enemy it has not decisively defined. So the truth is, if you look at, I wrote an article the other day at who killed Brigadier General, the Brigadier General that was killed. I mean, the top level officers.
General Uba.
Is this misdiagnosis and this refusal? When 7/7 happened in August 2000, 2005 in Britain, Tony Blair moved quickly to identify the enemy. If you look at the 9/11 report in the US, because you are dealing with the same Hydra, it's a local problem, a global Hydra with local phase. The US was quick to define it, but the truth is this: you are dealing with a sophisticated Hydra that collapses nations from within. It is patient, it is disciplined, it is lethal, it is strategic, and it is opportunistic. So what am I trying to get to you now is that until the commander-in-chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces publicly and precisely names the enemy, describes its ideological foundations, its command structures, talks about its financing networks, reveals that openly, recruitment pipelines, geopolitical sponsors, not just the local, but the global. Honestly, we are still headed in the same direction of defeat.
Interesting analysis, Reverend. So I want us to interrogate that a little bit more closely, because based on my own experience, also, you know, as a frontline spectator in the villa, I was a spectator, by the way, but frontline in the villa, I could see that clearly the expectations that we had, you know, as a matter of fact, the reason why many of us supported Buhari's presidency was that he was going to knock out the enemy. But to your point, I saw the struggle to call out that these are the forces. I remember that some of our principals actually told him, I said, look, if you can't stop these folks, you know, it's going to be difficult. Someone like you ought to be the one to solve this for. So I gave that background to support your perspective and to now ask you that why do you think it's such a, in your own view, why is it such a big problem to understand who the enemy is? Well, I guess we do, but to call out the enemy, Reverend, you know, why is it difficult? I mean, this is an existential threat. Nigeria is the one that is bleeding from all sides, like you have said.
Well, I don't think it's a difficult question to ask. First of all, in those years, because of my work in the field, and I remember there was a meeting we had with Muhammad Buhari before he became president. There was a stakeholders meeting where we asked him a few questions, if I recall very well then. And when we asked the questions, I mean, the questions were simple that, look, there's been a lot of killings through the years. We've heard a lot of your comments. His comments definitely were not sympathetic to the terrorist activities going on within the country. If anything, his comments sort of gave room for misinterpretation that he was in fact himself a sympathist. Now, the truth being told is this. If you remember his comment about the baboon and the dogs, mixing the blood of the baboon and the dog, two times he made that comment.
Yeah.
It would seem that it may be coincidental that prior to the declaration of that electoral victory, presidential victory for him, of course, there have been people who have come out openly in northern Nigeria who were part of his party and all that then, who established that, look, they brought in troops, mercenaries, to effectively establish what he believed was a grievance. And if those reports are true, the upsurge we saw in the Fulani activities, not the Boko Haram. Okay? Remember that the Boko Haram is mainly Kanuri. But we saw an upsurge in the Fulani insurgency. We saw the fact that helicopters were delivering supplies to them. There was obviously complicity in high places in Nigerian governance. I remember that on this station, I had an interview and we called out the fact that an Al-Qaeda operative had just been appointed as a federal minister under the Buhari government. And despite the fact that this was known globally, the Al-Qaeda operative was able to serve, then let's again look at the policies that came each time. What we're just talking about here right now is that it seemed as if the compromise, the solidification of the compromise in high places actually multiplied under his tenure as the commander-in-chief. There was a brief spell when he first came in, when we seemed to regain territories, but immediately afterwards, it became clear that the impunity with which the Fulani militia was operating, the body language of governors like El Rufai in those days was indicative of complicity. And like I keep saying, if you look at the policies that came out of it, when you capture Fulanese, go to the police station, their weapons are returned, they are released. And you look at the string of activities like that, you should know that a house that's divided against itself will ultimately, even time will fall. So the Buhari years were not very, I took care of a lot of victims. And I can tell you that it was underreported. The number of victims that were being, people kidnapped, atrocities going on left, right, and center, territories that were being seized. Actually, Nigeria's geopolitical definitions were being redefined throughout tenure of his presidency.
Okay. Well, Reverend Larry Thompson, thank you so much for your views today. We will continue this conversation in my next edition on Friday, because I still have some more important questions. Thank you for coming to Inside Sources, Reverend Thompson.
Pleasure is mine.